Most people think that they're building generational wealth, but the harsh truth is that 70% of families lose it by the second generation, even if they make it that far at all, and it's only getting worse. The idea sounds simple enough: leave a little something behind so that the next generation has it easier. They do the same for their kids, repeat that enough times, and eventually you've got generations who don't need to work because they've inherited so much wealth. Sounds nice, right? Almost like a fairy tale. But let's be honest, we'd all like to help the next generation do even better than we did. That's kind of the point. But the reality is it's getting harder than ever to pull that off, and for most people it might not even be possible at all. And it's not your fault. The system's not exactly set up to make you rich. So let's dig into why this is happening, and I'll show you exactly how this trap is closing and the few ways you can still break free. So why is building generational wealth actually so difficult? Well, first off, the system's pretty much designed to make it hard for you to build any kind of serious wealth. In an ideal world, you would earn your salary, it would grow over time, and after paying for somewhere to live, your bills, food, and maybe a couple of holidays, you would steadily build up your savings. And as you move up in your career, you earn more, which should mean you save more, which is easy, right? But the reality is, because of our tiered income tax system, the more you earn, the more they take. It's literally built to keep you from stacking serious money, all while collecting more tax for the government. A flat rate tax system would say, earn as much as you want and we'll just take the same cut. Simple and predictable. But instead, the higher you go, the steeper it gets. For context, the top income rate tax in the UK is 45% on anything over £125,140. And that's even before you add in national insurance, which tax on another 8 to 13.8%. Sure, if you're lucky enough, you can funnel up to £60,000 into your pension right now, but let's be honest, that's not cash in your pocket today. Whether you think that's fair or not, the whole thing is designed to limit how quickly you can build wealth. Part of that's intentional to slow down the wealth gap from growing even faster, but realistically, it punishes people trying to break through the middle. And of course, if you're rich enough, you can get around it in more creative ways, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. But it's not just high earners who feel this squeeze. Let's talk about the median UK salary. Now, according to the ONS, for all employees, that includes full-time, part-time, and everyone, the median salary is around £31,600. But even at that level, once you paid income tax and national insurance, you're looking at a take-home of around £26,000 a year. That's your real working budget, what you actually have to live on after the taxman's had his cut. And here's the real problem, is you're not just battling tax, you're also in a constant race against inflation. Prices for everything, housing, energy, food have climbed relentlessly. Even when wages go up on paper, they often just keep pace or worse, fall behind. In fact, UK real wages, that's pay after inflation, were basically flat for over a decade. We've only just clawed back to 2008 levels in 2024. That's 16 years of working to stand still. And even when you see headlines about wages rising above inflation, it doesn't tell the whole story. These stats often focus on average earnings at big employers and high-paid sectors. They don't reflect what most people actually take home, especially in those smaller firms, part-time work, or lower bands. It's classic averages trickery. I mean, Jeff Bezos and I average out as billionaires, right? But it doesn't mean that I can go off and buy a yacht. Even if your pay went up 6%, if your rent, council tax, food shop, and energy bill all went up 20%, you're worse off. It's a classic illusion. They will tell you that wages have beaten inflation this year, but ignore that prices have already climbed so much in the last few years that people are just trying to keep their heads above water. I saw someone sum it up perfectly online, and they said that £35,000 doesn't have anywhere near the value it had just a few years ago. We don't get state help, but we don't earn enough to be comfortable. And that's the reality for millions. The gap between the so-called middle-class jobs and minimum wage has been shrinking. Even NHS admin roles are now only pennies more than the new minimum wage. So when politicians and headlines talk about wage growth beating inflation, remember they're often ignoring who that's true for and what real life actually costs. When we talk about building wealth, well, it's like trying to run up a down escalator. No matter how hard you push, the system is doing its best to keep you in place. Now, let's say you've actually beaten those odds stacked against you and you've gotten yourself to a point where you can save, and you're thinking about investing to grow grow your wealth. And if you're here subscribing to this channel, you're in the right place. Now, you would assume that your wealth is probably going to follow this nice, simple curve. You start with nothing, unless you've been really lucky, and you build your savings and investments over time. You keep growing them, then at the end, you pass that nice, fat pot of cash on to the next generation, which sounds lovely. But that's not how it usually works for most people. Economists even have a name for this. It's called the life cycle hypothesis. The basic idea is your wealth doesn't just go up forever, it actually follows a predictable shape over your lifetime. When you're young, you don't have much. You might even be in debt, student loans, credit cards, and car finance. As you get older, you accumulate wealth and you earn more and you pay off debts, you save and invest, and your net worth rises. But then comes retirement, and this is a stage you enter called dis-saving. That's the term economists use to describe how you go from saving and investing to spending down what you've built, because your income drops or it will stop, and you still have 15 to 20 years of life to fund. So the wealth curve isn't a straight line going up forever, it's more like a hill you climb and then you come down the other side. And that's totally normal, that's what it's for. You spend your working life saving up so you can afford to stop working and live comfortably. But it also means you can't just assume there's going to be this big untouched pot left at the end for the next generation. Unless you seriously oversave, like by a lot, most of what you build will get used funding your own life in retirement. Realistically, the only way you escape this trap is by earning and investing enough early to build such a big reserve that even after this dis-saving phase, you've still overshot your target. But let's be honest, that depends massively on how much you earn, how much you save, or what type of spender you are. And for most of us, that's just not the situation we're in, unless you hit the jackpot, win the lottery, or you sell a company for millions, which, let's face it, we can dream about, but it probably won't happen. Most people don't get to that level of overshoot. So if that isn't really the reality for most people, what does a realistic scenario actually look like? How long would an investment portfolio really last you once you start living off it? Let's put some numbers on it. So there's a rule of thumb in retirement planning called the 4% rule. The idea is quite simple. You can withdraw around 4% of your portfolio each year and have a reasonable chance it won't run out over a 30-year retirement. So if you built up a £1 million portfolio, which is already an enormous achievement for most people, that would give you roughly £40,000 per year to live on, which at first glance sounds good, but compare that to actual living costs. The median UK household is spending now around £27,500 a year according to the ONS, and that's in today's money, because a real problem here is inflation. Even at a modest 3% average, inflation halves your purchasing power in about 23 years. Or to put real numbers on it, £27,500 today would need to be around £50,000 a year in 20 years' time just to buy the same standard of living, meaning what feels like a comfortable budget today could get crushingly tight later on if your income doesn't keep pace. Don't worry, there's a couple of things that can help here, like the state pension and reduce spending at 75, but the point is, even with what seems like a big pot saved up, you're not guaranteed to have some massive chunk left over to hand down. And even if you do have that chunk to hand down, what comes next? Inheritance tax. So even if you do manage to scrape together a decent deposit to hand down, don't get too comfortable, because waiting at the finish line is everybody's favourite final boss, the taxman. So here's how it actually works. You get £325,000 tax-free, plus up to £175,000 if you're leaving your home to direct descendants. Now that sounds generous on paper. That's £500,000 per person, but everything above that, HMRC takes 40% just like that. And before you think this is only a problem for millionaires, have you seen the prices of UK houses lately? A decent home can swallow most of that allowance on its own, leaving your family with a lovely surprise bill. We recently saw a huge change for farmers where we saw there used to be full agricultural property relief, meaning farms could often escape inheritance tax entirely, but not any longer. From April 2026, this relief, combined with business property relief, will only cover the first £1 million of combined farm business assets at 100%. Everything above that gets 50% relief, and the rest is taxed at 20% effectively. So for example, a single farmer passing on a farm worth £2 million would lose relief on £1 million, so gets around £100,000 taxed at 20%. Now that might sound tame, but multiple estates already owe six-figure bills, and it's not like they're making a fortune or have the cash in hand. All the money is just tied up in the value of the property. And let's face it, most of us wouldn't choose to do the job farmers do by any means. It shows that they're just out of touch with what people actually want. And this isn't just some rare edge case. HMRC raked in £7.5 billion in inheritance tax in 23-24 alone. That's £7.5 billion meant for families and small businesses that went straight to the treasury instead. Well, let's not forget, you can best believe they've already paid tax on that money. Pay tax on your life, and then another tax when you die, which is a huge barrier to passing anything on. Now, on that cheery note, let's talk about what are some practical steps you can take to help avoid this. Okay, so we know how the taxman can swoop in and claim 40% of everything above your allowance. It sounds terrifying, but the truth is most people don't actually pay it. About 96% of estates avoid it completely. Why? Because there's rules and allowances built in that let you get around it if you know how to use them. We have the allowances that I've just mentioned, and also anything you leave to your spouse is completely exempt from inheritance tax, no matter how much it is. And even better, you could transfer unused allowances to them. So when the second partner dies, the estate can potentially pass on up to £1 million without paying a penny in inheritance tax. Honestly, that's why the majority of states never see a bill. The system is designed so typically family homes and savings get protected if you plan things properly. Now, what if you wanted to give the money away before you actually die? Well, HMRC encourages this up to a point. There's something called an annual gifting allowance, where you can give away up to a measly £3,000 a year, which is completely tax-free. Now, it's not going to buy anyone a mansion, but it does add up over time. Personally, I feel like if you want to give your money to one of your relatives, you should just be able to do so. And also, there's the big one, which is a 7-year rule. If you give away your assets and you survive 7 years, they are then completely outside your estate for inheritance tax. If you die within 7 years, HMRC drags it back in, but with taper relief that reduces tax if you make it past 3. So if you want to help your kids, it pays literally to start early. Now, it's worth saying this isn't a loophole, it's just the rules and using them to your advantage. There's also trusts. Now, people love to talk about trusts like they're some kind of magic tax shield, but the reality check is they're useful, but they're not a silver bullet. You can move assets into trusts above your allowances, and you're looking at a 20% lifetime charge up front. If you die within 7 years, potentially hit 40% anyway. Plus, trusts face a 10% anniversary charges, around 6% and exit charges when the money comes out. They're great for controlling how money is used, especially for minors or the vulnerable beneficiaries, but they're complicated and cost money, and you need proper advice on setting one up. But there's also something called insurance in trusts, which is a popular move. It doesn't reduce your inheritance tax bill, but instead you take out a policy big enough to cover it. You put it in trust outside your estate, and when it dies, it pays your heirs directly so they don't have to sell a family home to pay HMRC. And finally, which is what I think is one of the best options, is a family business. This is one of the most powerful but overlooked ways to pass people wealth tax-free. If you have shares in a qualifying trading business, they can get 100% business property relief, meaning you could hand the company to your kids with no inheritance tax at all. But it has to be a real trading business, not just an investment shell. You need to have owned it for at least 2 years. That's why so many family firms plan early, bringing in the next generation as directors and shareholders while you're still alive. But the point is, none of these are secrets. These are all things you can action. It's not tax evasion, it's just being smart with your money. Otherwise, HMRC is more than happy to take your share. Now, the really controversial question here is, how much should you pass on? And should we be building generational wealth? Because the truth is, building real generation wealth involves a lot of sacrifice. If you really wanted to, you could sacrifice your own life and enjoyment now so that 5 generations down the line, they would have a free ride. But let's be honest, will they even know you? I mean, think about it. Can you name someone 5 generations back in your family tree? Most of us couldn't. There's a fascinating video I watched which lays this out beautifully. It shows what your ancestors would have had to survive for you to even be here. Famines, wars, plagues, the absolute worst times in history to be a human. It's honestly mind-blowing. But it also makes you realize something. For all that sacrifice, we barely even know their names now. It sounds harsh, but 5 generations from now, they won't have a clue who you were either. And that's really strange to think about. It's the same with those who inherited big country estates you see on the National Trust. Their family name might be on a plaque, but the actual person is forgotten. So for me, that's why I think it's better to stop obsessing about leaving a fortune 5 generations ahead and instead focus on the generations you actually know, your kids, your grandkids, the people whose lives you can actually see yourself impacting. So what can you do to help them now? This is where investing actually shines. Now, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, XTB, who has what I think is one of the most flexible, no-nonsense stocks and shares ISAs on the market right now. more. If you ever felt like your investment platform is quietly robbing you with hidden fees, platform fees, and trading fees, custody fees, you're not imagining it because it does add up. XTB's ISA helps you solve that problem, and you can invest in thousands of global stocks and ETFs with zero commission on trades up to €100,000 a month. And even above that, it's just 0.2% per trade. And there's no platform fee or custody charge under €250,000. What I really like about the platform though is they pay 4.5% interest on any uninvested cash you leave in the ISA. So if you're waiting for the right opportunity or you just sold something and your cash is just rotting in your account, you want to put your cash to good use and use something like this. Plus, it's a flexible ISA, which is an underrated feature. You can withdraw money and put it back in later, and it doesn't eat into your £20,000 allowance. It's so handy if you're managing big expenses or want to have more control over your cash flow through the year. You can invest even small amounts with fractional shares and invest in your favorite stocks from just £10 and turn them into assets that will work for you. So if you're looking to invest more tax efficiently, cut out unnecessary costs, or you just want a more modern ISA setup, XTB's is worth checking out, and I'll leave a link in the description down below so you can see how it works. Now first, learning to invest properly means you have a bigger pot to work with, so you're more likely to have something left at the end anyway. But it also lets you help them while you're alive and can see them actually benefit. You can use your own ISA allowance or your tax-free lump sum or your savings to help them with real goals like a house deposit. If you really want to give them a head start, there's also junior ISAs that let you save up to £9,000 a year tax-free, and junior SIPs which allow £3,600 a year, including 20% tax relief. These aren't just numbers, they're ways to teach them about money early, get them investing while they're young, and actually watch the impact happen in real life. And for me, that beats sacrificing everything now so that someone you'll never even meet might be rich one day. Honestly, it's how I feel about inheriting anything myself. I'd much rather see my relatives use the money and enjoy it. We only get one life, there's no respawns, no second tries, and I don't want my family skimping on their retirement just to leave me something. I'd rather them enjoy every penny and be as happy as they can with the time they've got, and I plan to do somewhat the same. Sure, I want to help my kids and grandkids, set them up with the right tools to invest and build their own wealth, because honestly, even just teaching them how investing works, opening a junior ISA and getting them started early, if they do it right, they'll be 10 times better off than just getting a lump sum decades from now. So balance enjoying your life now with leaving a legacy. Just make sure it's one that actually helps people that you love. If you want to see exactly how I'm planning to retire at least 10 years early, check out this video right here where I break down my whole strategy. And if you've already seen it, this one might also help. Either way, I will see you guys over there. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.